Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you the shocking developments of The Young and the Restless. It all started on a gloomy afternoon, when the wind blew silently through the Newman mansion as if signaling an ominous omen for what was about to happen. Nikki stood silently by the window. The glass of wine in her hand had long gone cold, but she did not realize it. In her tired and bitter eyes was a constant struggle, a secret she had buried for decades. Something that seemed to have been buried under layers of time dust, now suddenly revived, making her unable to bear it anymore. Since Victor was hospitalized for a serious heart attack recently, Nikki could no longer lie to herself. She knew that if one day Victor left without knowing the truth, she would live the rest of her life haunted and tormented. But worse than that, she knew that revealing this secret could completely destroy the family she had tried so hard to keep. Especially Nick, the son she had always loved with all her heart. The one she and Victor had once believed was the crystallization of their love. When Nick walked into the living room with a gloomy expression, Nikki knew the moment had come. But she had no idea that the truth she revealed would be the trigger that would cause Nick's entire world to collapse in an instant. The truth was like a knife stabbing deep into Nick's heart. He couldn't breathe. The world around him seemed to darken. A feeling of loss, betrayal, and loss flooded his mind. Nikki, the mother he had respected and trusted completely, was now the one who had kept the biggest secret from him. Not a simple lie, but a truth that called into question his very identity, and his loyalty to the Newman family. Nick slammed the wine glass on the floor, the glass shards flying like the sound of his heart breaking. In the extreme anger, he screamed without making a sound, his chest heaving violently as if about to explode. Nikki trembled and stepped back, her eyes panicked but without regret. Because even if she was hated, cursed, she could not take that secret to the grave. Nick left the villa like a lost soul. He drove aimlessly through the familiar streets of Genoa City, but nowhere could soothe the pain gnawing inside. In his mind echoed the images of Victor, the exemplary father, the person he loved, hated, fought for, and in the end always returned to as a peaceful place. Now, everything turned to nothing. The first question that stabbed into his mind was, if he was not Victor's son, then who was his biological father? And why had Nikki kept silent all these years? How many times had he confronted Victor, left his family and returned? Did all that matter, when the foundation he had relied on until now turned out to be just a false shell? Nick became obsessed. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't talk to anyone. When Sharon came to find him, he just looked at her with a lifeless gaze, like someone who had no more emotions. Sharon was worried, but didn't dare to ask, just stood by him in silence. But deep down, Nick knew he couldn't continue living in a haze. He had to find the truth, no matter if it meant digging up the past, facing the most painful things, or turning over the pages of memories that Nikki had deliberately hidden. He began his search silently but fiercely. Old hospital records, birth certificates, Nikki's personal diary, and even people who worked for the Newman family at the time all become pieces of a dark jigsaw puzzle that Nick is forced to decipher. Each step he takes has unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, Nikki is completely isolated. Victoria, despite her anger, tries to keep her cool to protect her mother from falling apart. But she can't help but feel confused. If Nick is not Victor's son, will his position in the family still be the same? Who else knows the truth? Does Victor know, but has kept quiet for the sake of honor all these years? When Victor learns what is going on, he flies into a rage. The feeling of betrayal from his closest wife makes him want to destroy everything. But unlike Nick, he chooses to keep calm on the outside and use his power to investigate in his own way. He hired someone to follow Nick, to follow every trace he was pursuing. Victor did not want this truth to destroy the legacy and position he had built his whole life. But the more he tried to cover it up, the more the truth came out. No one expected that the man Nikki had a brief relationship with at that time was a scandalous figure in the international business world, who had been involved in a series of political and financial scandals, a man who, if the truth were revealed, could drag the entire Newman family down to hell. Nick finds an old private clinic in the suburbs of Genoa City, where, according to the archives, he secretly took from Nikki's personal drawer. She had gone for prenatal checkups around the time she was pregnant with him. The building is old and abandoned. But an old nurse who used to work there is still alive and is now in a nursing home in Wisconsin. Nick drives all night to see her. When he mentions Nikki's name, the nurse falls into a state of confusion, then quietly whispers a name completely unfamiliar to Nick, but one that seems to carry some special weight. It is the name of a man who was a major donor to medical charities in the 1980s, a New York businessman known for his lavish lifestyle and a series of scandalous affairs. According to the story, he had a brief affair with Nikki at a major fundraising event in Chicago, right around the time Victor and Nikki had a falling out. The story had never been made public. No one, not even those closest to him, knew that Nikki had disappeared for a few weeks and then returned as if nothing had happened. Nick returned from Wisconsin with a troubled mind. He couldn't deny the coincidence in the timeline, couldn't ignore the fear and guilt in Nikki's eyes every time he asked. He secretly sent a DNA sample to compare with Victor's. But the results came back like a knife. The bloodline was 0%. Not a drop of Victor's blood ran through his veins. The past, the conflicts, the pride. The times he stood up to defend the Newman name, all of it was now a bitter joke. He took the results, shaking like a lost man. That night, he stood in front of Victor's house. The rain pouring down like screams in his heart. He didn't knock. Didn't need to say anything. He just put the envelope containing the results on the steps, turned around and left. Victor picked it up the next morning. After reading it, he just sat quietly in his office for hours, not saying a word. The shock was so great that he was no longer angry, only empty. Meanwhile, the news leaked out unexpectedly to the media. A blog specializing in high-class scandals posted an article with the title referring to a powerful Genoa City tycoon who has been raising another man's son for more than 3 decades. Although no specific names were mentioned, with the reputation of the Newman family, just a little hint was enough for the public to guess the identity. The news quickly spread, causing both the company and the family's reputation to fall into crisis. Victoria was forced to speak up, holding a press conference to control the damage. But major investors began to question the leadership structure of Newman Enterprises. Ironically, Nick now became a stranger to the company he had once devoted himself to. The gossip did not stop at the financial world. Those who once envied him now had the opportunity to attack, mocking him as an imposter, living off the power of others. Friends turned their backs. Ex-lovers looked at him with pity. He became isolated. However, in the midst of that dark picture, Nick did not allow himself to fall. In pain, he began to realize another truth. Although he did not have the Newman bloodline, he was still the sole heir in terms of temperament, morality, and leadership. He could not let a name decide his fate. And it was then, in his own silent madness, that a plan formed in his mind, a plan to redefine himself, no longer as Victor's son, but as himself, Nick. Nick began investigating his biological father, the man he had never met but who had left an indirect mark on his life. He went to New York, following the clues the old nurse had mentioned. The man, according to the records, had died 2 years ago. But he had a son, and that son was the CEO of one of the largest media corporations in America. Nick approached this man, who might be his half-brother, as a potential partner. The first meeting was tense, full of suspicion. But after Nick revealed his identity, the two men suddenly felt a strange sense of empathy. There was no handshake, no immediate bond, but it was the beginning of an unlikely alliance, 2 men, both bloodstained. Both wounded by family secrets, determined to change their fates, and the world around them. Meanwhile, Nikki lives in constant torment. She gradually loses the support of her loved ones. Even Catherine, her longtime best friend, cannot stand by her side when she learns the truth. Nikki is left alone in the large mansion. Waking up every night to a recurring nightmare, the image of Nick looking at her with broken eyes, as if all love had died long ago. Victor, although no longer angry, cannot forgive completely. He cuts off all contact with Nikki for a long time. The feeling of being deceived after so many years of living together makes him feel more tired than the struggles in the business world. However, a part of him still loves Nick, not because of blood, but because of the life they have experienced. And then, it is Victor who unexpectedly comes to Nick on a late winter afternoon. Not to mend things, but to make an offer, to hide the truth with him, to protect the family's reputation. In return, Nick will be the only successor he recognizes. Nick looked at Victor for a long time, his eyes no longer filled with resentment, but only deep sadness. He refused. Not because he hated Victor, but because for the first time in his life, he understood that he did not need the name Newman to prove his worth. He turned away and walked away, leaving Victor standing silently in the midst of the falling white snow like pieces of memories swept away by the wind, unable to be held. The story is not over yet. So please continue to follow and subscribe to our channel to be updated with the next exciting developments of the film.